Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever and wherever you're joining us. This is Blue Rock Station Sustainable Living Center's online free school, and I'm your current instructor, Aaron Joseph. This is a live broadcast with participants from the BRS Collective who are joining me to participate in this virtual setting, but you could also be listening to this recording on Blue Rock Station's YouTube channel. Welcome. I'll be sharing with you today some useful tips on how to boost your immune system and talk to your second brain. And then I'll be demonstrating how to make a fermented sauerkraut you can use as a cheap probiotic. Our goal in creating this virtual platform is to help others learn and understand how they can become more resilient in their own lives. And we hope to help you empower yourself to realize that you have gifts and skills to share with us and the world as well. BRS's online free school is just one avenue where you can access content connected with Blue Rock Station. Owners Jay and Annie Warmke host their own podcast called When the Biomass Hits the Wind Turbine, which can be found on all major podcast platforms. And they've also released high-definition educational videos through stetter.com. A free virtual tour of Blue Rock Station's Living Center can be found on stetter.com. And links will be provided in the comments section for further exploration. Without further ado, let's get started. All right, like I was saying, a lot of my information came from a podcast I listened to of Dr. Zach Bush on Collective Insights. Amazing podcast, highly recommend it. A lot of good information in general about health, scientific, genomic things. That's kind of how I got connected to it. I got involved with genomic coaching. I'm going to be certified here in the next month or two. I got coaching myself through this organization that I'm involved with. It's called a Piron Zoo. It's out of Asheville, North Carolina. And they do, like I'm saying, genomic testing, which we have our DNA in our bodies. But there's also epigenetics, which are, if you think about the DNA as being the hardware, our epigenetics is the software running on the DNA, more or less. So the great news about what we are finding out scientifically nowadays is that we can change our epigenetics. Say both your parents have a disease that they pass on to you. As long as you're living a healthy lifestyle, you can turn on and off these switches in your epigenetics and be a completely healthy person. You don't have to succumb to those diseases. That wasn't thought possible about 10 years ago, 5 years ago. So amazing discoveries. Science is finding out about this. But today specifically, we're going to be talking about gut health. So talking to your second brain, lifestyle choices based on that. So I'm going to start off talking about toxins, one of those including antibiotics. I want to say the overuse of antibiotics. I should specifically say that because antibiotics can be very useful, as been shown in the past 100 years for killing off diseases, but in an overuse sense, they're not very good for us. They're killing off our microbiome. So there are about 800 prescriptions of antibiotics per 1,000 people that are prescribed every year. Pretty astounding number. Even more astounding than that, there's 4 times that amount of antibiotic being used in the meat industry, being used for pigs, cows, all these animals. And the funny thing is, it's not even to get rid of disease. It's more for meat yield. They'll give low-level doses to these animals, and it's to create more meat, basically, not to kill off disease. So interesting fact I learned in a book called Missing Microbes. Another antibiotic we're going to talk about is glyphosate. A lot of people think it's just an herbicide. It's actually patented as an antibiotic. So also known as Roundup. You can buy it at the store. There's commercials that used to be on TV of the guy walking out spraying his dandelions, killing them off. Dandelions are actually really healthy for you. Funny story, but Monsanto, now owned by Bayer, chemical company out of Germany, owns Monsanto, but they created Agent Orange back in the 60s that was used in Vietnam War to kill off plants so the U.S. military could see the enemy. But it turned out to cause all these bad effects on all the people that came into contact with it, and still pervasive to this day. So the same company, Monsanto, created glyphosate as supposedly a less toxic version of this glycine molecule that they've adapted. But as we're finding out, it's still having a really big impact on our health, specifically our microbiome. So it's very soluble, water soluble glyphosate. So when they use it on the plants, it runs off and it gets in our water supply. It's even in the air, they found. There's 4.5 billion pounds of it used every year. A big number. And a lot of it now, farmers have been encouraged by the company to use it as a desiccant. So what that means is when they spray it, they're trying to finish the crop out all at the same time. So they'll start one side of the field of planting, like wheat or whatever monocrop they use, and then they want the other side of the field that they planted last to die off and be dried at the same time as that. So they'll use a lot of glyphosate on the youngest side of the field to kill it off. So the plant, not when they spray it on there, it increases the yield because the plant's trying to survive and spread its seeds. So the seeds, the actual grain of the wheat, let's say wheat, will just get bigger and it will dry out. So there is a point to it in some way, but it's really probably poisoning our food supply. So the whole gluten intolerance thing, most likely it's directly correlated to glyphosate than any other factor. So that's something to be aware of. Another toxin we're going to talk about is alcohol. I know I like to imbibe here and there. I'm not fully abstinent when it comes to this, but there are some choices we can make on drinking alcohol. That's another thing that's really big in our culture, is drinking alcohol. And the funny thing is, if you drink wine, or a lot of the alcohol out there has glyphosate in it too, so it's a double whammy. So you're getting the caustic effect of the alcohol and the glyphosate all in one package. So what it's doing, like the glyphosate and the alcohol, it's damaging your tight junctions in your gut. So like, say this is your gut wall, like it's killing the bacteria that are in there, but eventually it's causing your gut wall to separate. So you get these gaps in your gut, and they call it leaky gut. So that's a fairly new term too, but it's starting to become a common known thing among doctors. So interesting, very interesting. If you do want to drink alcohol still, from what I've read, red wine is really good. If you can, try to get it South American or from Europe. Try not to drink American red wines, just because the glyphosate in it, and I think I read the sulfites are higher. Sulfates, so like just be aware of that. I've felt better by drinking foreign wine when I drink it, and 1 glass per day, ideally, half to 1 glass, like that's ideal. You can also drink fermented cider, homemade cider, or kombucha too. That has a low alcohol content, but like you can still feel a little bit of the effects. I think Eduardo mentioned that he drank a little bit too much kombucha one time and felt a buzz off it. So next, another kind of toxic thing for your microbiome or gut is painkillers, or anti-inflammatories, also known as NSAIDs, like ibuprofen. They do have the same effect, really, with breaking down the gut lining, the tight junctions in your gut, as well as sugar. Let me make sure I'm moving on with these slides here. Yeah, so painkillers, sugar. That's one thing with sugar. If you can try to avoid that. I know with my genome test that I got personally, that I'm a sugarholic. If I start eating sugar, I will keep eating sugar if unless I get that thing out of the room and space. It's better if I just don't have it around me at all because I will go crazy with it. And that's it's funny. My epigenetics coach was able to tell me that based on my genes. He could say, "Oh, your ancestors were the ancestors that or that the people that climb trees and would get the fruit out of the trees." And it's funny. I mean, it's just crazy that they can read that. Um, so let's talk about water too. That's a really big concern that I have. I didn't even realize. I mean, luckily I grew up on spring water. My house had a natural spring, so I drank pretty clean water growing up. But as I moved into the city, I tasted city water. I'm like, what is this? I had no idea what it was initially, but it's probably the biggest thing that you taste in most tap water from a city or municipal water is chlorine. Chlorine's pretty potent, so um, I would. There's also microparticles that can't be cleaned out of the water. Say like people are taking all these medications, uh, and they're very small particles. So when people pee or use the bathroom, that water goes to a wastewater treatment plant. Uh, the tools they have or machinery they have do not take these microparticles out of the water. So um, when you're just be aware of that. Like what is it, Flint, Michigan? They had a really big thing going on about their water quality, and they're still having issues, I think. So it's kind of going on everywhere. There's a website out there that tracks water quality, so I'd highly recommend checking that out. But let me just make sure I'm not missing anything with the water. Plastic in water. There are definitely microparticles all over from plastic as well. So if you can, with your water, I get reverse osmosis water from the store. I have about 2 or 3 5-gallon jugs that I fill up every few weeks. I also have a water distiller in my basement. I don't use it much currently, but it's there if I need it. And a friend of mine showed me down in Hocking Hills here in Ohio. There's springs here too that you can go fill up. So we went down there about a month or two ago and filled up all my jugs and his jugs, and that's probably the best. If you can find a natural spring that's like not downhill from a farm that's using herbicides or anything like that or fertilizer, then that's the way to go. Like and you can get a cheap water tester too to tell you the parts per million of any particles that are in the water. Um, so let's move on away from the toxins and actually get into like some of the good things you can be doing for yourself, or actually ingesting, and not the bad things you're trying to avoid. Uh, so diet, that's probably the biggest uh, influence on your gut. The prebiotics, there's probiotics and prebiotics. Probiotics you're going to be getting from the fermented sauerkraut that you make, just like Eduardo is eating his fermented sauerkraut, crazy kraut that you can get here in Columbus, Ohio. Um, that is loaded. Once it ferments, there's a lot of lactobacilli that are created from that, but also the prebiotics, which are the food for the probiotics, so your microbiome. The prebiotics are like the food. So just know, if you didn't know those terms, that's starting to become more prominent as far as the lingo goes. But the bacteria in your gut will thrive on that. You want to at least have 1 to 2 servings of these fermented vegetables a day. You do want to try to eat mostly organic too. Just like I was talking about with the glyphosate, a lot of people think it's more costly, which it can be initially, but if you're having gut problems and you heal your gut, it will potentially take less food for you to feel satiated and for you to get all the nutrition out of your food that you're eating. So I used to be worried about, oh, organic's so expensive, but like, not only will you potentially be more satiated because it's more nutritious when your gut's healed, but you won't be having doctor bills that you'll have to be paying too on the back end. So yeah, just treat your body well in that way. Buy the best food quality you can, and local is ideal. I know here in Columbus, Ohio, Yellowbird is amazing, and a few other CSA type organizations. The one thing I see on my list here is also elimination diets. Those can be really useful. Sometimes if you are having gut problems, um, adding fermented items to your diet might exacerbate symptoms, might actually make you feel worse initially. So elimination diets like the GAPS diet or a lectin-free diet might be pretty useful for you to start initially as a baseline, and then start introducing new foods in. That's what that is. You start at like a baseline with a few small food groups that aren't causing you issues, and then slowly add in other things to kind of test the water with what might uh, be making you feel bad. Um, Also, the Mediterranean diet is pretty useful to a lot of people. I'm not, some people listening might not eat fish or meat, so there's ways to work other foods into that are similar to that Mediterranean. But typically, a vegetarian or vegan lifestyle is really healthy as long as you're avoiding uh, the high glyphosate foods or foods that are exacerbating. So, like, you might be eating all veggies and all vegan, but I know vegans that eat all they eat is candies. So I mean, it's kind of it's a mixed bag too. So you just got to know what you're eating and what works for you. Uh, so a lot of garlic in your life, a lot of ginger, cayenne pepper. Those are all good for gut health and immunity. Um, what works for me, or what I've read and I've done, is cleaning out your cupboards too. If you know you're going to, if you're trying to start this new diet or some new protocols in your life, to get rid of the foods in your house initially that you can't eat anymore. So you can donate that food. Annie suggested you can compost that food, so, which is great. Um, so let's move on to another topic. Some more lifestyle choices you can do. Exercise is pretty vitally important in everybody's life. So whatever that means to you. So when you exercise, you're stimulating your lymphatic system to get rid of toxins in your body. But also your mitochondrial health is really pretty important. Mitochondria, um, these are the powerhouses of your cells. They basically help you create all the energy. That's they're finding that's the basis of like good health. If you have good mitochondrial health, like you will be a pretty healthy person. Uh, so it's just I'll have some links in the YouTube comments for you guys to explore if you have further interest. But my biggest thing that I like to do exercise wise is high intensity interval training. It's kind of the biggest bang for your buck. The workouts last anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes, and then you're done. And studies have shown that doing this workout is just as beneficial, if not more beneficial, than like a 50 to an hour long workout at a lower intensity. So like, yeah, check it out. High intensity interval training. I love it. But running, walking, yoga, weightlifting, whatever works for you that you like, you can switch it up. But a little bit of physical movement every day will help stimulate your body and your gut. The studies have shown. So sleep's a really big thing. I think that's like one of the most important things you can do for yourself that I've found out is get good sleep. Whatever, I'm gonna have some tips or like some links to that too, because I think that's pretty vital. So when you are getting good sleep, your circadian rhythm is on, so your chemical production, stress hormones are all regulated based on your circadian rhythm. So when you get good sleep, that happens. Cell death happens too. So Dr. Zach Bush talks about how cancer cells are really your own cells, just old cells that are kind of unwilling to die. Like they just want one last hurrah. They're trying to pass on their good genetics, but they're just stick around. So when you get sufficient sleep and you mix that with fasting, your body the bad cell or cancer cells won't have the energy, and they'll just die when you're sleeping. Or I mean, there's a bunch of other different factors, but that's a kind of thing that we're figuring out now, or Dr. Zach Bush describes it well. So devices at night too, if you can avoid, I've trying to get into the routine of not looking at my cell phone at least in a half hour before I go to sleep, because that can really throw off your circadian rhythm. And you can get a red filter. iPhone has it now, but you can get it for your computer. You can wipe out all these blue light that's hitting your eye and like causing your circadian rhythm to be thrown off. So yeah, be aware of that. I'll try to post some links to it. Um, Behavior changes, I think. Yeah, I've got it right here. Behavior mods. So that's one thing I've struggled with personally is actually doing that for myself and like changing my behavior, even though I know all the right things to do. Like actually doing it and creating that for yourself is like a whole nother level. You know, you gotta. So I do want to offer you some tips with that. So uh, you do want to set clear goals for yourself, whether that be written down. Apps on your phone that you can download to help you do this. You want them to be specific, measurable, and attainable. Uh, so make the plan realistic for yourself too. Don't try to shoot too high, because I mean you have to know yourself in that way. I've definitely shot too high a few times and I just couldn't do it. So make it attainable for yourself. Avoid making too many changes at once too. And there's a thing called stacking behaviors too. That's a term that psychologists use. Behavior stacking. So say I want to add flossing into my daily routine. um, I brush my teeth every morning. I trim my beard. So if I want to add that flossing into it too, just I already have those other behaviors set up for myself. All I'd have to do is just add that flossing right below that. And if you do that a few times for like a week or two, it's just going to become part of that natural order. So that's called stacking. Just add it on to like your other routines that you're already doing. So it's a really useful tool. It's worked for me. That's worked for me more than anything. And with the sweets, going back to that behavior change, if you are a sugarholic, little bites have helped me with that too. Uh, just take little bites and savor that sweetness. I don't have to always eat like a whole filling or a whole bowl of something or ice cream. And if I really savor that and find that mindfulness in that moment, that can be very satisfying. So that's a slight behavior change. I'm done with the presentation about this. I'm going to move on to the sauerkraut making or the slaw making. Let me just exit out of this here. Anybody have any questions so far? I can take them at the end if you do too. I know Kristen's watching the live chat. So let me just move this stuff out of the way and get this tray in front of me. Take a sip of water while I'm at it.
I did just want to comment on something.
Yeah, please. Go ahead.
I did want to share my experience. Like, I definitely have really taken to heart a lot of these kind of topics in the last few years, because I think it's safe to say that I had a very poor kind of digestive system and just not the best, overall lifestyle. So a lot of those things from personal experience, I feel like have been very useful. And um, I know that, doing too much at one time can also be rough on the body. I've done that route, but then not doing enough, can also not really yield great results. So you have to be like realistic about where your strengths lie and know. And also I think the most like critical part out of this whole journey, at least that I've been on, is you create such an intimacy with your own body. And it's very, one, discouraging in the beginning, because it's like saying, okay, let me really, tune into what's going on with my inner workings. And then when you find, wow, like I'm looking pretty rough, it's kind of hard, to say, well, where do I start? And And, how long have you been like that? You've been so ignorant to yourself, which is crazy because it's like your existence is you, but you can be so disconnected from yourself that you just go on day to day to day, not realizing like that you're hurting, your body's telling you it's hurting. Then eventually you like, I don't know, you hit a point or you come across some kind of revelation, and you're able to see like, finally I am in tune with my body, and this is what my body needs. Or you don't even know what it needs, but it needs some sort of change. So I know from just creating that intimacy, listening to your body is like, your body's going to tell you everything it needs, from my opinion. I don't know if you think
No,
that's
I fully agree, man. Uh, One thing my sister told me the other day, she's a chiropractor. She said sometimes when you're feeling these cravings, to sometimes just wait a half hour. Um, and then if you're still having that craving, it might be a legitimate craving that you can go for, like that your body is telling you, I need this. But sometimes it is just that craving, that impulsive dopamine addiction to substances like sugar that we're feeling. So she said, wait a half hour if you're having those feelings. If you're still having those feelings, you might actually need it. And I found that to be pretty useful when she told me that. But yeah, any other questions or comments? I'll move on to the slaw making, coleslaw. Are you ready, Kristen? You got pretty much everything prepped?
Yeah, I would just say a thing I found is like when you're trying to do behavior change, I do feel like it's really difficult if you do it on your own. But if you can find someone else who's also interested in changing a behavior, it doesn't even have to be the same one. So like for example, I've done things where like my friend wanted to give up coffee and I wanted to give up sugar. So we said, okay, we're going to try this for 30 days and like hold each other accountable. And then it just makes it a little bit more fun and like of a challenge, but it's easy to say you're going to do something, and then if you haven't told anyone, then it's easy to not do it. But it's more fun if you're like doing it with someone else, and then you can text them and you're like, I just want this candy bar. And they're like, I saw someone drinking in a Starbucks this morning and I really wanted it, misery. So, but yeah.
Accountability partner. I think that is pretty useful. Well, I'm just gonna pin this here for a second. Point this down here at my cutting board. Okay, so this here, I'm just gonna use half a head of cabbage right now, red cabbage, a white cabbage, or you can use a red cabbage, whatever you want. Kristen's using both right now, which that combination works just fine. So I've already got my other ingredients all set up here, pre-cut, just so you don't have to wait on me to cut that. But I do want to show you how to do this. Depending on how fine you cook this or cut it, will affect how quickly it ferments. The larger the pieces, the slower it's going to ferment. But also two other factors that are important with fermentation process is the amount of salt you use. If you use more salt, that's going to slow down the fermentation. Also, if it's hot out, depending on the season of the year, the room that the jar is kept in, that'll affect it too. So say you use less salt and it's very hot, like in the summer, you're going to have that ferment really quickly. It's going to have a quick process. But if it's the winter time and you're using a lot of salt, it's going to take a while for it to ferment. So just know that variability too, as well as the cuts of the pieces. So I'm like set up in my room right here doing this just so I could like have access to my computer too. But ideally, setting this up in your kitchen here would be pretty. You'll have all the stations set up, but I have all my resources right in front of me. So I just cut it like that first. Try to keep it all together. Flip it this way now, and then kind of just create small chunks like this. There's some tricks to cutting tomatoes and onions too I've found pretty useful. So yeah, one thing, sharp knives. I think Eduardo pointed that out last week or the week before. Really sharp knives are useful. So the knife will do all the work, so you really don't have to do much of it. I mean, with the cabbage, you need some pressure, but this knife is doing most of the work, which is great. So I'm just gonna chop it a little bit more through here, one more little slice. So like I was saying, I talked a little bit about the probiotics. This is your best probiotic that you can give your body. The whole fad of buying a probiotic in a bottle, Dr. Zach Bush talks about how really you only want to take those if after you've taken a round of antibiotics, or if you're sick, you can take some of those to just hop up your gut bacteria, but you don't want to take those every day because there's only a set amount of the bacteria. It's a monobacteria, I think is what he called it. So if you take those every day, you're going to wipe out all that diversity of bacteria that you have in your gut. It's just going to overpopulate with the bacteria that's in the probiotic, and you don't necessarily want that. So this is your best bet to have fermented vegetables every day. So you're getting the prebiotics in the vegetable, but also the probiotic of the lactobacilli on this. So this is what I did. I added it to a bowl, and now I'm going to add some spices. So let's start with a little bit of cayenne pepper. I don't want to overdo this one, but I do like a little bit of spice, so I'm okay. You just got to know what works for you and the people in your life that are going to be eating this. So we'll do
Aaron,
that.
do you have a general ratio of like garlic to cabbage that you use?
I love garlic, so I had a half a head of cabbage. Let's say I'm gonna have like 2 or 3 cloves of garlic in there too.
Okay, that answers my question.
I'm just gonna add this at the end though, so my hands don't get like too sticky from the garlic. So I'll add that at the very end. I'll put that right there for now. But I'm gonna add this other stuff too. This is some red radish here. Just add some of that in there. Here's some turnip. And I did pre-cut these. Turn it up. Is that what you're getting at? Yeah. And here's some carrots. You can see some of your veggies, other than the cabbage that you're adding, you don't have to like finely chop it as much. I did with this carrots, but you could have bigger chunks, which is fine. It's just going to ferment a little bit slower, but that's totally fine. So have any other questions?
This is what my carrot looks like. Is that acceptable?
Oh, it's hard to see.
Or like long, thin slices.
Yeah, that'll be pretty good.
Okay.
Yeah, it's fun to experiment like that. There is like no fully right way to do this. I mean, the biggest thing is just making sure you're getting all the juices out of this, which I'll show you here in a minute, but also submerging this in the jar. It needs to be in its own liquid. If it's out of that, other bacteria, like the bad bacteria, I don't like that term, but the bad bacteria can like get on top, and you really don't want that. You want all of this to be submerged underneath the juices, so the anaerobic respiration can happen, which is respiration without oxygen. So let's add some turmeric to here too. I'm just gonna, I love turmeric. I used to not understand it, but I have acquired the taste for it. I've got some curry powder too. This one's great. So I'm gonna add a decent amount of that one. All right, so that should do it. And let's add some sesame seeds while I'm at it too. Kristen, what spices are you adding?
So I chopped up cabbage, carrots, fresh ginger, and fresh garlic.
The ginger. That's the one thing I'm not gonna add to this, but I do love that.
I have 3 different jars, like small jars. So I think I'm gonna put ginger in like one and not in the others. And then I haven't decided what spices to add. I was waiting to hear what you did. I think I might do cumin and paprika and chili powder in one to get weird. And then I'll do like turmeric in the other one.
That's perfect. There is no right. I mean, that's a good combo right there. I talked to Annie, and this is a recipe that we decided on, which she's tried in the past, which works pretty well. So let me make sure I've got all my things. Last but not least, some salt. Like I was saying, you want. We're going to start off light with this, but that is what's going to help with the fermentation process. So you definitely need salt in there, and some nuts. I've got some pecans and almonds here. So we'll just add those in there. And now I'm going to get to using my hands. And this can be a pretty rigorous process with your hands, but you're just going to take your hands and squeeze, basically make fists. Like, if you're really angry, this might be a good, you can make food. Well, I wouldn't suggest that, actually. Like Eduardo was saying, you're going to add that negative energy to it. So maybe that's a bad idea. So, but yeah, this is a really good for your hands. It's a good hand exercise. Luckily, I've been playing a decent amount of guitar lately, so I think my hands are up for the challenge. Yeah, what you're trying to do right now is break down the cell walls of all the veggies here. So all that juice in the cells is getting released. So this can take like a few minutes to get it all going. Because I mean, right now it's feeling pretty dry. I'm starting to feel a little bit of liquid come out, but it's definitely, you can probably hear it through the microphone crunching a little. I don't know.
Yeah, you can hear it.
So yeah, it looks like pretty well spiced right now. So you can, like we were talking about, always add light spice initially, and then you can always add more. If you over spice something, it's kind of hard to backtrack. Okay. So let me see what else I can talk about. One other thing for gut health are some of the supplements you can potentially add into your diet. I mean, like I said, fermented food on a daily is really suggested. But if you are having gut issues, I would highly suggest L-glutamine. L-glutamine is great. Calendula flour is really good. Licorice root extract is excellent. I take that like when I'm not feeling good, and that really helps. But if you need something like heavy duty, even more than those, where you're just having severe gut issues, the company that I'm involved in, I'm doing the coaching, is really getting into biologics. These are peptides, which peptides are long strain amino acids. They're a bunch of amino acids put together. Your body produces these. That's what, they're natural. So like you can't overdose on peptides, which is pretty cool. But there's one specific for your gut that is produced in your stomach. Scientists have called it BPC 157. I've taken this and it's helped me out a lot, but it's highly suggested. I mean, if you're trying to heal your gut and nothing else is working, that is a great option. So, okay, so my ferment now is getting pretty juicy, almost there. I'm gonna taste it really quick though, make sure it's my liking with the spices. I've got the curry hands going on. I got a few wipes here. Help me out. 1 sec. Okay, let's try this. Yeah, it's spicy. It definitely needs more salt though. So I'm gonna add another at least teaspoon of salt to that. Maybe some more sesame seeds. I like the spice to it. Yeah, it's got a good spice. Curry's good. Okay. I just got another minute or two of this. I think we're good. Another good thing you could add to your diet is local organic mushrooms. Yeah, I would highly suggest that. I'm trying to think of the documentary. What's the documentary, Eduardo? The fungus one that Paul Stamets just did?
Well, he was in it, but it's called The Fantastic Fungi, I believe. It's really good, really good.
Yeah, I still have to catch that documentary, but there's a lot of good information nowadays that mycology in the world is kind of the basis for all life. I mean, well, it's in the soil, it's soil health, but mycology is the network between all the plants. So if you don't have healthy soil with fungus in it, you're generally probably not going to have the healthiest plants, which so that's become really big. I would suggest maybe taking some mushroom supplements. There's some online, but just eating mushrooms on a daily too, or at least a few times a week. And I found that I read that sometimes eating raw mushrooms just by themselves aren't actually the healthiest. So what you want to do is cook them. You want to cook them in like olive oil or avocado. That can really help get some of that nutrition out of the mushrooms. Another thing to think about is lectins, which I talked about the elimination diet. There's a lectin-free diet, which lectins are plant proteins that, excuse me, my hands are getting tired. I'm sure Kristen's feeling it too. But yeah, it is getting damp. But lectins are plant proteins that plants produce to stop herbivores from eating them. So say the tomato skins and tomato seeds all have lectins in them. And that's the highest concentration, the skins and the seeds. So the Romans and Italian people still to this day remove the skins and the seeds from there because it's really not good in high concentrations for your body to have those. But like beans, when you ferment those or soak those, and even rice, when you soak the rice or wash the rice, you're getting rid of those plant lectins. So that can exacerbate symptoms in your gut too if you're having issues. So just, yeah, read about lectins or the lectin-free diet. Okay, I think this is finally ready. Let me just clean my hands off. How's yours coming along, Kristen? Yeah, she's got her microphone turned off. That's fine.
I did want to bring up another topic that you kind of skipped over, but since we're on just other variety of things that can essentially boost your digestive system and immune system all over. What's your take on fasting and all the different forms of fasting?
Oh man, I briefly touched on that, just briefly. I didn't want this conversation to go on for like an hour about gut health because I had a longer lesson. But fasting, there's so many. I think I'm still learning, or like I'm trying to implement that into my life. I'm not doing that enough, but from what I've read, it's fantastic. If you can create up fasting, it wasn't working with my lifestyle because my job didn't allow me to fast when I wanted to. I was working too late in the day. But if you can fast, I mean, every individual is different with fasting. So one fasting technique might not work for another person, like you got to figure out what works for you. But ideally, I would say that the most ideal one for myself would probably, if I could cut myself off eating dinner at like 6 and then not eat again for another like 16 hours. So I would go from like 6 p.m. to 10 a.m. A couple times a week. That's all I would need. And while you're sleeping then, like I was saying, that cell death would happen and your body will regenerate. There's just a lot of positive effects from it. You can do your own research, but yeah, Eduardo, good point. Like I think that's highly beneficial technique you can use for good health that ancient people have been doing it for a while. They've realized that you can stimulate your immune system by fasting. So I think, there's definitely a lot of legitimacy to it. Okay, so now this ferment, now that it's all squished and I've broken down all the cell walls, I'm gonna scoop this into here. And you wanna fill the jar about 3/4 of the way full, because if you overfill it, that liquid is going to come right out the top. And when the first time I did this, I made the mistake of sealing the lid on top just because I was kind of ignorant of the process, and the thing exploded. I'm not the first one to say that, because Sandor Katz talked about that in his book. But just be aware of that. I'll show you the right technique in a minute. And be innovative. I didn't have, or I do, I've got a potato masher here, but it doesn't fit in my bottle. So I had to come up with a different technique. This is just a chili bottle, but it works pretty well because I can get a grip up here and then I can smash this down into here like this. So that's what you want to do. Let me move this out of the way so you can see a little better. So yeah, now you just want to press this down, and you're even like getting some more of that liquid out by doing this. So you really want all this submerged in there. You just want all that. So I'm going to add a little bit more, get it up to 3/4 again. All right.
The mashing process is very difficult.
I know, right? Yeah, it's definitely energy consuming.
That is my feedback.
Yeah, but it's so worth it. Considering that bottle of crazy crap that you buy at the store is like $7 or $8, which is awesome because you don't have to do any of this labor. But a little bit of this magic that you can do from home for way cheaper. I can make about 3 or 4 bottles of that for maybe the same amount. Well, I haven't done the cost ratio, but I'm pretty sure it's a little bit cheaper from home, but it definitely takes more labor. So almost done here. I think this will be the last of it. If worst comes to worst, if you don't have enough juice rising to the top out of this, what I've read too is, I've got a little bit here. Let me just show you. You just take a little bit of water, not much. You don't need that much, but just put a little bit of that in there, and that'll help to submerge it. Okay, so now that's in there. One thing too that Sandor Katz in The Art of Fermentation talks about is if you do develop some like discoloration on the top, all you have to do is scrape it off and throw it away. The whole bottle is not that bad just because that top is. If you see that down the bottom though, that's not good. Most likely that's not going to happen because that bacteria can't grow in the water. But if you would see discoloration down here, throw it out. But if it's up top, just scrape off the top, clean it out a little, and it should be fine. So now, what you can do, I do have a little hole in this lid already. That's fine, but if that didn't have a hole in there, you don't want to tightly screw that on there and let that sit for any more than a day. This bottle might explode. What you can do is just put that on there and let it sit. So there's room around the edges for that gas to escape, because when the anaerobic respiration happens, the byproduct of that process is gas released, if I didn't say that already. So you can use that lid. You can use a coffee filter right on top of here. Put a rubber band on there so those gases can come off the top or just come out, and nothing can get in there to disturb it. So now that I've done this, made a jar, you just want to let this sit out in a room for anywhere from 1 to 2 days. You can just let that sit. You can check on it. You can eat it right now, some of it, to test it. But whenever it tastes good to you in the next like day or two, that's when you can take the actual lid, seal it on there, put it in your fridge, and that's going to slow that fermentation process down almost to a halt completely. It's still going to ferment a little bit over time, but like once it's refrigerated, it'll pretty much stop it for the most part. Any questions, comments? There's a lot we went over there, so thanks for listening. Thank you everyone who joined us today live, as well as those who are watching this recording. We've enjoyed creating this content for you, and we sincerely appreciate you giving us your time. Please keep an eye out for future free schools by connecting with Blue Rock Station's email newsletter, or by subscribing and liking this YouTube channel. On May 3rd, Nicholas Anderson will be teaching a free school about survival skill techniques. And on May 17th, Ryan Evans will be informing us on the topic of activism through graffiti. Don't forget to tune in to Jay and Annie Warmkey's podcast, When the Biomass Hits the Wind Turbine, which will be linked in the comments below, as well as links to their fabulous Stetter.com content. Thanks again for joining us, and we hope you stay tuned into future free school lessons. Until next time, see you on the flip side, all you cool, self-reliant people of Mother Earth. Adios.